the game and different areas that they specialise in. And I thought, oh, Rob would be a great person to talk about wedge play.
Happy to do that. So fire away, and then we'll get this thing going. And I guess people can ask questions, do they?
Yeah, people can put questions on as well if they've got any. But you know, if we get back to how long have you been studying the wedge play for now?
It's about 7 years now. Pretty in depth, and you know, it's been a situation where Lane and I started this, and kind of thought about it initially. What will we do? I'd actually dabbled a little bit in wedge play before Lane and I got hooked up together, because I did a presentation for the GBNI PGA when they had their annual meetings at Northeast Cleveland, up near Lee, little town, beautiful little town. The Tour de France went through there a couple of years back. Anyway, so we then started to formulate a plan together about what we would do, and so you're going to look what's written or what's available in other forms of media, and there really wasn't good information. So a lot of ideas about this is what you should do, or this is what I feel when I'm hitting wedge shots if you talk to tour players and so forth. So we took on the task of going, well, let's go and find out at least what the best wedge players in the world do. And I'm not going to say that then that's what the recipe that everyone should use, but at least we've got some substance there, and then find out what are the common things that they do. And at least then you go, all right, there can be variations or nuances on a theme here, but if you're going to hit a distance wedge, this to a tour level green, then these are the sorts of attributes that all of them display. Or if you're playing a little finesse wedge shot off a tight line, how do they play that shot, and what are the common characteristics of it? And so that was our task, and we did. You know, some form of launch motor. It might have been DC Quad or TrackMan 3 or 4, depending on what was available at the time. I got my quad about 3 years ago, and we had a GC2 at one stage, and then I've used TrackMan many times. TrackMan wasn't particularly, or TrackMan 3 wasn't particularly good for the really short shots. Didn't ever get much on club delivery, but always was good on the ball, and I think the GC Quad is always very good on the ball as well.
Rob, can you turn the volume up on your phone?
What's that?
Can you turn the volume up a little bit? Somebody's put it's difficult to hear you.
Oh, it's on full. If you can hold for 30 seconds, I'm going to get a set of headphones.
Okay, yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm sure that'll be better now.
Oh, that's perfect.
The iPhone is not particularly good.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
And so anyway, I was saying that we went out and captured the best players we could get. I mean, major champions, guys who were renowned for their wedge play, and then took video, high-speed video, launch monitor data, and then 3D. So we felt like we've got a really complete set of data on, maybe now it's up to about 12, like what we would call really high-level players. I mean, we've got a lot of tour players as well, but they might not be renowned for their wedge play. So that if you look over the generations of tour players, there are some guys like Tom Kite or Brett Rumford or Luke Donald who were notorious for their wedge play. And if you look statistically, Justin Rose was the same. So those sorts of caliber players. And then the task after that was to organize it into something that was going to be useful for both a coach and then hopefully later on for the players. And so that's really where Lane and I came up with the concept of the control variables. And so that's, if there was one part that I'm kind of, I don't know, proud about is that we were able to organize a hierarchy of things that you need to be able to do particularly well and then be able to control or vary. So if you look at the control variables that we identified, you'll see that many of them are, oh, well, you do that in the long game as well. Yes, you do. I mean, these are important for club ball contact. But with the long game, you're not looking at trying to vary these things. You're trying to keep, like, I want my 6-iron to have about the same angle of attack, 4 to 5 down every time I hit it. I don't want to change it from one shot to be 8 or 10 down to the next shot to be 3 down. You want it the same each time so I can hit my 6-iron and get a predictable trajectory. Wedge play is not like that at all, particularly the finesse wedge zone. Is you are really looking to, first of all, to be able to deliver the club consistently and then be able to vary the way in which you deliver it to meet the requirements or the affordances that the shot gives you. And as you get more and more adept at short game shots, there are many more options for you to play. So if you're a 20 handicapper who can only chip with a flat-faced club, there aren't very many options that you have available to you. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum, you're a highly skilled or you're a developing player, then there might be 3 different shots that you could play from that same location with different clubs. Or a tour player might have 10 different shots that are equally effective, but require different ways in which to move the body and deliver the club and different landing spots and spin rates and all of those sorts of things. So it's been a nice piece of work to put that all together, have the evidence to say, yep, this is what good players do, and there isn't a huge variation amongst them, despite what people might tell you, and then to go from there and develop all of the teaching skills, drills, activities to enhance performance. So not just, oh, this is what you need to do, but here are some ways in which you can do it. And then if you want to extend and really build some skill, here are other activities that you can go work on by yourself or with someone monitoring you or whatever. So that's the...
So what were the key ingredients that these guys possessed which made them excel in this area?
So I would say if we go to those control variables, what we did was said attack angle was at the top of the hierarchy. If you couldn't control your attack angle, then it was going to be very, very difficult for you to be a good and consistent wedge player.
And was that attack angle consistent for that player, or was that attack angle
no. It's pretty consistent amongst the players for certain conditions or types of shots.
Okay.
So if you put them on a tight fairway and ask them to hit a 10-yard carry finesse wedge, their attack angles that they choose, we didn't say you have to hit this in a certain way, you just have to carry this 10 yards, whatever is stock standard for you, square face, their attack angles were within a couple of degrees. So somewhere between 3 to 5 down for that type of shot. But then as soon as you went to open face conditions or out of the rough, then they would manipulate the attack angle to meet the requirements of that shot. So out of the rough, depending on the lie that you give them, they would vary their attack angle considerably. So if it was sitting up on the top of the rough, they'd go as shallow as they possibly could. If it was deep down, they would, do what the classic instructional books will tell you. Well, you've got to hit down on this one to get through the grass and blah, blah, blah. So, and you can simulate that sort of thing just by putting a ball on a tee, on short grass, put it on the tee, versus putting it, on the ground.
Yeah.
And you can teach people, for example, well, if the ball's on the tee here, then we need to really be careful with our attack angle here and be shallow. Because if you're hitting down and it's on a tee, it's like a driver, on a tee. If you're steep down on it, it's hard to get the face, right?
And that attack angle that they changed, either making it steeper or down, was that did that come from a different setup, or did you see a mechanically different action for them to do that?
Some of it is garnered by setup. So if they're, and that was one of the kind of surprising things initially for me, is how far forward the ball was played in the stance compared to what traditional golf coaches would have told you. And if you go to the extreme, you look at what David Pelz was advocating. His was always ball back, play it off your right foot, turn your right toe toward the target if you're a right-handed player, this is. So it was kind of lined up with your ankle, and then, you could hit a low running shot from there, but it didn't give you much variety. Whereas when you asked the tour players, it was much more center of the stance or even further forward, depending on what the turf conditions were and what type of shot they were trying to hit as well. But much further forward in the stance than I think a lot of people might have expected, actually. So they would get some from setup, and if they really needed to be steep, then they'd probably adjust the tilts on their body as well, so that they can ensure that they can deliver the ball further down. But then they would do things differently during the swing or in swing as well, in order to create different different attack angle conditions. So if they knew they had to be steep, then they kind of stayed down on the ball longer. They'd be on their left side. I'm going to talk as though it's all right-handers here. I apologize to the left-handers in the audience. All right. Stay on their left side, keep their upper center left as well. They'd still rotate, but they probably wouldn't extend through the torso as much as if in a case where they're really wanting to shallow the attack angle out. They'll do a lot of rotation with the torso and a little bit of tilt to the right as they're extending through the torso as well. So they would get a lot of shallowing from the way they would move their upper body. So both translationally and then also rotationally as well.
And I mean, when I was lucky enough to spend some time with Brett Rumford, and a lot of he did through setup, little refinements in feet position, where his weight was, where the ball was, and then
where the hands are, what the club face leading edge orientation was. Yeah, exactly.
And almost, and I was quite surprised with him, was he did quite a lot with where he felt it within his feet as well, where he felt the pressure was left or right, forward or backwards, in order to promote a certain move that he wanted.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Brett Rumford is quite amazing, and if you've had time to observe or observe him playing and practicing and that sort of thing, or getting you engaged and talking about your game, it's just so insightful because he's pretty analytical. I can remember the Australian Institute of Sport head coach telling me that in many ways they had to chase Rumford from around the short game area to go and do some long game work, which was just the opposite of virtually all of the other aspiring young players who were in the AIS program. So Mark Holland would And Mark and Rumford would spend a lot of time just competing against each other in all of these different shots and trying different clubs from different locations and trying to get different spins on the ball and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, that's how you become masterful at these sorts of shots, because there is so much variety in the finesse wedge shots around the green. There's very little variety in the distance. All of the nuances and subtle differences of the way to deliver the club, to move your body, to change the height and spin on the golf ball, all of that sort of stuff literally takes years to learn and practice so that you can, I mean, it's not good enough to be able to do 1 out of 10 of those when you get it right. When you're playing golf anyway, you need to be able to call up that shot when it's called for and be able to...
The thing is, Rob, they've got every shot they're playing from this sort of round the finesse area could be off a completely different length of grass, could be off a completely different lie, uphill, downhill, right? The flag could be positioned anywhere. The green condition could vary massively from shot to shot. And, you know, what the player has an ability to do is use that intuition to organise what he's doing in such a way that he can produce what he needs for that shot.
Yeah, and rather than call it intuition, Michael, I'd probably call it short game intelligence, and that's kind of one of the keystones of our control variables. Is that part of the intelligence equation is having developed enough experience trying different shots to know what might work in a particular situation and what definitely won't work, so no point trying that. And then of the possibilities, teasing out which are the most likely, or which is the most likely to give you the best result under the conditions as you read them. You know? And all of those things that you talked about there, where the wind's blowing, what's the lie, what type of grass, what's the green surface like? That's a huge thing. You know, how firm it is, what's the slope where you're going to be trying to land the ball, all of those sorts of things makes a massive difference on short game shots that doesn't really have as big an effect on long game. It does have an effect, don't get me wrong. So hitting out of the rough versus from the fairway is equally important long game as short game in terms of control of the golf ball. But there aren't so many decisions or choices. And you're out of the rough. Well, the decision you might make might be more, well, I can't really afford to go at this flag because it won't stop, or I need to be a little more conservative, or whatever it might be. Whereas in the short game, it's much more complicated, the decision-making process there. So,
and you said there that the key factor to start with was the angle of attack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in order for the control. What other factors were there in there, or?
Okay, so the next level down, and that's not far down at all, but very, very close, is shaft lean and club speed. So I got a lot of pushback. I remember the very first presentation, it was the 60 GB&I pros in Harrogate. Harrogate's the name of the town. And I came in there and I looked at different length shots, 40, 50, 60, and 70 yard distance wedge shots. And I said to them in the presentation that, oh, well, you need about 12 to 15 degrees of shaft lean, going from 40 up to about 70 yards. And it was like, it's like someone just went, heresy. I mean, No. That's not how you hit short game shots. Well, I said, these weren't the best players in the world, but I said, the sample size I've got here is 30 PGA European Tour Challenge or Korn Ferry Tour level players. And I'm just telling you, this is what they did. I'm not lacing it with any attitude. This is what they did. And, at one stage, actually, the day before that presentation, I'd got all these results out, and I went, oh man, there must be something wrong with my calculations here, because these numbers just seem so wildly different to what everyone else had said, it should be. But I actually then calculated it a second way and reran the whole data, the same thing. The results were the same. Okay. And then that's just been continuously confirmed as we've gone along. And it's a kind of a funny thing, Michael, because if you told someone in a lesson, a mid-handicapper or a single-digit handicapper, well, you're launching the ball really high with your 7-iron. We need a little bit more shaft lean. You've got to get this launch down, and you'll be able to hit your 7-iron further and control its trajectory better. There would be no argument from every golf pro that you came in contact with that would be the right way to go. But in those early days, there was a lot of, I think, questioning. And look, I have no problem with people questioning me as well. I think that's a good thing. I don't think you should just take everything at face value. You need to be a bit of a skeptic. But I knew my data were correct, and I said, well, I think you need to go and do some of your own work. And as it turns out, you take video and you measure the shaft lean of the impact, and you'll find that on your good wedge players, when they're using a good golf ball, they'll lean the shaft further forward than your typical poorer wedge players, even in the same cohort of players. Because I think that there was a misunderstanding between what a wedge shot should look like versus what a tour player wedge shot looks like. So
yeah, absolutely. I remember going out with Brett, and he even set up as his handle forward.
Yeah,
he says, and he said many things to me. One comment he made to me on the very first morning I worked with him was, "There's no rotation in short game," and I went, "Okay." And then I know, and this later on, I'm like sat around the dinner table with him, going, "This morning you made a statement. There's no," and he went, "No, there's no conscious rotation. If I'm set up." He said, "If I'm trying to rotate, there's something wrong." And he would always have the handle forward at setup, always. Mm-hmm. And he said, the times I said to him, well, because there was this misconception, wasn't there, that we should almost scoop it with the right hand and use the bounce and clip it up. And he said, I never use my hands, I use my body, and that's delivered in as a result of.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. I mean, again, that insight that he has is, it's like a gold nugget there for you, just to get that, because the best wedge players are pretty passive with their arms and hands and do a lot with their body, particularly compared to people who are not good wedge players. They're much more active with their arms, and then it's just so much more difficult to control the speed of the club head when you're relying just on your arms and hands. Now, you might be able to do it well in practice that way, but in the heat of competition, it becomes tremendously difficult, where all of the tone and the muscle changes and that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
And his was done a lot by his body. He would set up a little bit on his left, slightly into his toes, so he could stand up and rotate. And even though he said don't rotate, he did and finish here. That's what he would. That's what he would do. And I don't know whether sometimes what he does, is slightly individual to him, or whether that's a general across the board.
It's a general across the board Yeah, general across the board for finesse wedges, that you will be extending your spine, your head will be rising, maybe slightly tipped back, but definitely not down, inflection at all. So, and I think, Michael, just to clarify too, it's not like the pelvis is thrusting in towards the ball. The pelvis is pretty stable and it's rotating, of course, slight lateral movements. So the extension is basically coming from the upper torso, not from the hips going in and you're standing up. So the classic early extension concept is not appropriate here.
It's almost like it's almost like your whole upper body is controlling where the trajectory where that golf club's going, as though if your arms were just connected to you from your elbow joint, the only way you could lift the arms up to make a swing would be to extend and rotate the body to do it. So you know the arms really are quite passive.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean they're obviously rotating faster than your body, your upper torso, but not by much. Particularly with the really small shots, they're about the same actually, and they just kind of get up to speed, whatever that speed is, and then they glide. They just stay at that speed. So all of your body segments will do that same sort of thing, up to speed, and then so the whole notion of kinematic sequence, where you're trying to generate and then transfer energy, isn't really appropriate on the short wedge shots, because the energy requirement is so small. You could create energy in multiple different ways to get enough energy in the club head to hit a ball 10 or 20 yards. But if you want to hit your 6-iron 200 yards, there are very few options that you have available to you in terms of how the human body moves in order to hit a 6-iron 220.
What I find quite interesting, Rob, is that they can hit shots that are actually quite short, 10, 30 yards, and they can affect the spin on the ball so much. I stood on the side of the green and Brett said to me, I'm going to hit this in and it's going to stop dead. Second bounce. Stopped. And then he said, I'm going to draw this one in. I'm going to fade this in. I'm going to pop it up so it rolls it. I'm going to spin it back, right? And it was amazing that from such a short range, you could create so much change and spin in the golf ball from very little, you know. And to me, you taught somebody who's very good at it, you know, and he is exceptional at it. But some people are really good. It can't explain how they do it. I sometimes find really, really great athletes can do it, but don't necessarily know how to do it, right?
Yep.
So, you know, in a sort of let's say science way, how do they create that amount of spin in such short shots?
So they intuitively know, Michael, that all about the physics of contact, even though if you ask them about it, they wouldn't know. They would be able to, like someone like Brett or Justin Rose or Luke, Jason Duffner, they'd be able to tell you what they think they're doing or what they're trying to do, but they don't know actually what they're doing. But in fact, what they've managed to do is synchronize these things so that it does match up with the physics. Like you and I can do that. There's nothing magical about something that's on their golf club or the golf ball that they use. That's stock standard.
No, there's not, because I had to go with his wedge and his ball, and it wouldn't do that for me.
Yeah, I mean they get good equipment, and they replace their equipment pretty often, and they obviously use the best ball available. But what they've learned how to do is deliver the club in a way that can maximize the spin and the trajectory, land angle, spin combination so that they can get the ball to behave. So what they have to do is manipulate the control variables in order to do that. All right? So a study that Stephen Orr and I did at the RNA research facility at well, it's no longer at St Andrews, but it's at Kingsbarns, right? We got a robot and then looked at impact all over the club face to see what changes we had in spin with different contact points. Well, there's marginal differences between the spin hit from the sweet spot and anywhere else on the club face. Essentially, no different. Right. But there is a very strong correlation between club head speed and the spin. So the more club head speed you have, the greater the spin you'll be able to generate. Yeah. And then secondly, but importantly out of that robot study was that contact point on the club face makes it, and you knew this already, makes a huge difference to the carry distance. So if you're using a wedge that would, if you hit it out of the center, carries 75 yards, and you hit it out of the toe, it's only going to carry 55 or 60 yards, right? So if you deliberately hit it out of the toe, and you made it carry 75 yards instead of 55 yards, then that ball is going to have a lot more spin on it, because the club head's going faster. In order to hit it from the toe, 75 yards, you've got to have really high club head speed, and that's part of the spin generation equation. So they know all of these little intricacies about where to hit it on the face, and then how to manipulate the dynamic loft that's delivered, and the combination of shaft lean and leading edge rotation, lie angle, all of these things in order to be able to get to that kind of that magic point. If you really want to generate as much spin as possible, you need to be getting close to 57 or 58 degrees of spin loft. If you go beyond that, there's a high probability your spin will drop. There's kind of like a mountain, you get to the peak, and it's kind of slower climbing up the peak, and then it's a precipitous drop on the other side. So if you get beyond the peak of the summit of the spin mountain, then you have a very rapid drop off in spin, because sliding starts occurring between the ball and the club face, and then if it's sliding and then it starts to roll, then you've lost your friction basically, and so the ball will pop up in the air like it was a flyer with no spin.
And these guys just do it. Yeah. They don't. Some of them just don't think about it.
No, they don't.
I mean, when you look at the formula to create that shot, it's almost impossible.
Yeah. How do you do that? Yeah. And then, you talked about Brett being able to say, all right, well, this one's going to land and kick left, this one's going to land and kick right. So he's going to be manipulating the club path by at least 15 degrees in order to do that. Like from 7 or 8 to the right to 7 or 8 to the left, in order to be able to get enough, I'll call it side spin axis tilt for the TrackMan guys, enough side spin to have that ball spin one way or the other. So it's and if you asked him, he could probably tell you that, but he wouldn't. He just said, "Oh, look, I know how to spin this one to the left," so he'll just go up and hit it. him do that at Star when I tested him, and it's just remarkable to see
You can
the
almost
control.
tell you how much spins on the ball.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I mean, that's not so difficult. If you've seen enough wedge shots, you'll be within a couple of hundred RPM as you get better at watching this stuff. Yeah, it's pretty amazing actually. And if you watch a lot of wedge shots as well, you'll be able to pick launch angle out within a degree. There you go.
And,
Oh, that one was 27.
and
That was 29.
is the optimum launch angle still about 30?
Can I use a mathematical term? It's a zeroth order approximation. I mean, it's okay to think, oh yeah, I've got to keep it at 30, but again, if you really want to be a good wedge player, you've got to be able to go, to launch the ball from maybe 24, 25 for a distance wedge shot, up to maybe 34 for still a standard, I'll call it square face finesse wedge.
And you know these guys who have this, let's say this wonder shot that they can hit in and come spinning back. Realistically, how many of them actually play that now?
Is
it only the very top players who have that in their armour?
I would say, yeah, and the guys who've really done some exploration in short game have that shot, but it's so situational, Michael, that when we were talking with Duff the other day, Jason Duffner, he could cite a couple of times situations in his years on tour where he used this type of shot. He said, or like on the second hole or third hole at Augusta, I might use this one. If I got into a position where I was down the right hand side of the fairway on 2, and I'd gone for the green, hit my second shot, I was in the out of position, pins tucked over on the right behind that bunker. He said, I might hit that shot then. Or on the third hole, that short par 4, pins down the front. If you don't hit that one there, it's going over the green. So, really specific situations, because by and large they don't like hitting it because it's too high risk, even for them.
And I mean, if you look at the data you've got, and we're saying, the Rumfords, the Duffners and play, they are the Luke Donald, they are the top of the tree at hitting these shots.
Yep.
So if we go down a level, I mean, these are still really good wedge players. Well, you know what I mean? It's not like, we're dropping. We go down to sort of European tour or what's the difference between the top and below? Is it just variation?
There are 3 things. They have many more shots available to them because they've figured out different ways to play that same type of shot. Secondly, they have even better control of the club face. And when I should say club delivery, because that includes face, loft, path, attack angle, all of those things. Speed, they have better control over those than their journeymen or their contemporaries. And then the third thing is that they've, I guess, got sufficient confidence that they can produce that shot on demand. Whereas maybe just a little difference in confidence is enough to make the regular European Tour player say, no, look, I'm just going to play conservatively here. I'm going to get it on the green and give myself a 15 or 20 footer, because I know that I can hit that shot and get it to that range all the time. Every shot I hit, I can do that. And if I got lucky, I might get a bit closer. So they don't want to take that risk. Or maybe it's a psychological thing as well. They're not prepared to take that risk, whereas these other guys are so confident about their short games that they don't feel like it's a risk. I can remember, I know this is not wedge play, but I've spent quite a bit of time with Brad Faxon over the years. And like, if he left a putt 8 foot short or hit it 8 foot past, he wasn't worried about that. He would just like walk up there, oh, it's an 8 footer, bang, hit it in. Whereas a lot of other guys would go, oh wow, I left that 8 foot short, and then all of that confidence stuff plays into what they do on the next putt. I know it shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
We've all got, but it does. It bleeds into there. Whereas the guys who feel like they're bulletproof, they don't even think about that. They're just okay. Yep, it's an 8 footer. It's a 30-yard shot over a bunker to a tight pin, and the pin slope's going away from me. I'm going to hit this really high spinning zipper, and it won't come back to the hole on those conditions, but it'll stop, and maybe I can get it to 8 feet or 10 feet, but if I just play a regular shot, there's no way. I can't keep it on the green if I just hit a normal pitch in there. So their ability to just dial up spin when they need it or take spin off is perhaps the most important thing, and then be able to control the trajectory as well. So controlling that trajectory in short game really means in the finesse shots being able to control your launch angle, because the ball's not in the air long enough for the aerodynamic forces to have much effect on the trajectory. So you can't get a steep land angle unless you have a relatively steep launch angle. Whereas in distance wedges, you can hit a 25-degree launch angle, and the ball's in the air long enough to get a 45-degree land angle. So.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
But when a minute ago you were on about the strike point on the face.
Mm-hmm.
How many times do these guys actually purposely hit it off center?
I think on the finesse wedge shots, much more often than everyone thinks. They're deliberately going to go low on the face and towards the toe. Not way out on the toe, but just towards the toe. So they can swing just that little bit faster for the same length shot. And down low doesn't afford them any advantage in terms of spin, per se. But what it does give them an advantage on is that the probability of some material getting between the ball and the club face decreases the lower you hit it down on the face, right?
Yeah.
But it also brings a leading edge into play too, if you're not that.
Yeah. And if they're purposely trying to hit it out, would they set the club up a little more upright, or would they just position it a little bit more on the toe?
They'll do both. They'll set it on the toe, maybe. They might go more upright, and then feel like they swing a little bit more to the left, move the handle more left, if they were trying to get it on the toe. There isn't a kind of a fixed formula for it. Some of them will do that. I mean, Luke, for example, every shot that he hits, he sets up with an open leading edge. I won't say open face, because those could be two different things, right? Yeah. But open leading edge for sure. Even until he gets to probably 60 yards and beyond, then he'll set up pretty square. But at 50 yards even, he'll put the club down, and it'll be 10 to 15 degrees open leading edge at that point. So.
Who do you think's the most impressive wedge player you've worked with?
I'd say if you had to pin it down to some, I would say the most impressive finesse wedge player is Romford.
Yeah.
but he's not the best distance wedge player. I think could be Justin Rose or Jason Duffner. One of those two.
And what would be why would you say the difference? What is the difference between somebody who's really good at the finesse wedge or someone who's good at the distance wedge?
I'll give you a long game example that'll probably ring true. Why is this person a great iron player versus this person who's a great driver of the golf ball? There are subtle differences in those two examples there between the way you need to deliver the club for driving versus iron play. And the same sort of thing, there are differences in the way you need to deliver the club for a finesse wedge versus a distance wedge. And you'd find that the distance wedge players would be better iron players than your finesse wedge players. And I think if you would concur that Brett, I mean, it's all relative to his peers, right? He's a good iron player compared to you and me, but compared to his peers, he's not. Right? And so he's a phenomenal finesse wedge player. And so probably the time and effort that he's spent in developing that aspect of his game meant that he didn't spend as much time on the long game. And so that's his weaker area.
It's such a fine line as well, isn't it? I remember watching him hit shots around the Dunhill, and sometimes I don't even think he looked at the lie. We were with two young Australians, Jake McLeod and somebody else, and he had some shots that he dropped behind bunkers and things, and you just can't believe your eyes when you're watching what he's doing. Yeah. And one I remember on one fairway, somebody said, "How did you play that?" And Brett's caddy went, "Don't ask him that. Not asking him that." He said, "And furthermore, don't try it this week." Because he said you might not even keep it on the green, right? Yeah. And exactly. But there's obviously a formula that allows you to be so good at a certain skill, and sometimes what makes you good at that skill means that you're not as good at something else.
Missed what you said then.
I said, Rob, that you can be the best wedge player in the world, but for him, I know when they put him on the force plates in Cron, his weight's all on his toes and in his left foot and his hands, right? But then he does the same thing with his driver, which you're looking
it's not the right combination.
Well, it's not the right combination. No, but you could throw one out by trying to adjust the other. Maybe sometimes you've got to accept this is the weakest area because of this.
Yes. And I think that from a coaching perspective, Michael, it's an interesting quandary to go. Everyone says, oh, well, you should work on your weakest aspects. So, if I'm a poor putter, I should spend a lot of my practice time working on my putting and not spend much time on my driving and long game because I'm good at that. Well, I can see the validity in the argument. Yes, you need to get better at putting, but if you, at the cost of losing your putting, improving your putting, you lose your long game, that's not a very good outcome. No. Now, I'll give you a little example of that in modern days. So it'll, I think, resonate with your English audience so Luke Donald was #1 in the world, and he'd been the money leader on both the PGA and European tours one year. And then I think, and he'd been working with Pat Glass. I don't know how much they did on long game, but he'd been quite a long time coach of his. And somehow either he convinced himself or someone convinced him that he needed to improve his driving because he wasn't a particularly good driver of the golf ball. And so he sought the advice of Chuck Cook, and they worked together for, I don't know how long, maybe it was 12 or 18 months. Maybe not 18 months, 12 months, 9 to 12 months. And look, he worked really hard. I know because I know Chuck reasonably well. He worked really hard at that. And from where I was standing, I thought the information and the concept that Chuck was teaching him was the right thing. But at 35 or 6 or whatever Luke was at the time, to make that sort of change was a massive change. You know, we're talking about, you know, how he releases the club. So he spent an inordinate amount of time on his long game, and his short game declined as a result. And so then he got to the stage where he wasn't, you know, great with the driver still. He still was a little wild, but now he didn't have the short games skills and quality that he had before to kind of make up for some of those inadequacies he had in the long game. So he was, in fact, much worse for having made the effort of trying to improve the weaker aspect of his game at the cost of spending not enough time on his short game. So I think there are valid arguments either way.
And I think it's an interesting one, especially if you look at the way the game is and the way players are hitting and things now. And you know, you could say there's this breed of golfer with real strong grips and bowed left wrists and big rotation, so they can hit it, you know, 350 yards,
enormous distances. Right? Yep.
You know, what do you do from 30 yards if you need to hit a little soft one over the bunker and you grip it like this? You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, it's tough. It's really difficult to get the right blend there. And I think, you know, to reach out to the coaches who are probably listening to this, it really places a tremendous responsibility on them to say, well, what's playable and what is not playable? Like if the grip, you know, is turned right around here, or if it's really quite strong, is that something that is manageable? Can you develop a short game with that grip that is going to give you enough flexibility? You can still hit lots of good shots with a really strong grip in short game, so that's not the issue. It just might mean that the range of shots that you have available to you is different to someone who has a standard or a slightly weaker grip, like a Luke does. So you got to say, well, the benefits I get from having a strong grip on my long game outweigh maybe the one-dimensional characteristics that I have to have in my short game because of that? Or do I need to have some sort of ability to slide the hands around a little bit and, you know, take a little bit out of the long game but gain a lot in the short game?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a really tough dilemma for coaches.
And I think there is this thought of whether a player can, you know, manage their grip and move it for different shots. But that might be okay if you're coming through and you're 19 and you trust it by the time. But you know, if you're a major champion or whatever, you're a top rate player, and all of a sudden you play around with it, you can throw so many things out the equation.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Before you know it, you know, you're not even as good as you were.
No, that's right. Yeah, suddenly you went from 1 to 500 pretty quickly.
You know, and it is that smaller margin these days, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It really is. It really is very, 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 very small margins at the top. But I was doing a little presentation with Lane, and we looked at a couple of examples. So this might be a kind of a good place to finish as well. So let's say you're Usain Bolt, who holds the world record for 100 meters. Right? It's 9.65 seconds. So if you wanted to take the world record from him, you've got to run, you know, something under that. So let's, just for sake of argument, it's 0.05 seconds. So what's 0.05 out of 9.65? I mean, if you quickly do the sums, it's less than 0.1%, right?
Yeah.
So that's the margin so that you're looking for at that elite level performance. Now, some of these tour players can get a 20% difference in spin rate between some shots they hit and their contemporaries. 15%, I'll be conservative, 15% difference. So that is a massive difference. So a Luke or a Rumford or a Tom Kite in his day or a Justin Rose, they can at times dial up a shot that might be 15% more spin than their contemporaries. So, no, they're not going to do that all the time.
No, but it's in the tank, innit?
It's yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you go. Now, can you imagine if you had a 15% difference in club head speed? Suddenly you go from 125 to 140 miles an hour. I mean, Jesus, the golf course looks different then.
Yeah.
You're talking about, who's that young kid from Maryland, the current long drive champion?
Oh, yeah. Paul Berkshire.
Yeah, Barker, yeah. I mean, he swings it comfortably each time he goes up there at 140 miles an hour, and you go, shit, it's a different game. So,
but it's amazing. Anyway. But Rob, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you very much for the invitation, Michael. I hope the whole series is going nicely for you.
It's been really interesting.
Good.
Just to listen at different perspectives, especially at this time where everyone, certainly in the UK, sat at home.
Yeah,
it's been really interesting to get a selection of, like yourself, the world's best in the coaching and learning just the little bits of detail of all these different people. It's been amazing. So
that's good.
Thank you.
I'm glad you reached out.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Have a good afternoon or evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.